Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Becca and I'm so excited we're hanging out today. Today we're going to be talking about a less fun topic, and that is dying plants. You might not know this, but I have a dog on my lap. Leo, say hi. So I was looking through some of my most popular videos, and one of my most popular videos, I still get comments on it now, is what to do when you think a plant is dying. So I want to revisit that topic. With that video, I sort of wanted to normalize the aging process that a plant goes through, because at first when you're very new to being a plant person, you might not know that that's something that happens, and you might not know when to be concerned about yellowing and brown leaves. What you see here is a leaf that is beginning to age. This is not an indication that the plant is dying, because as you can see, the plant is super healthy. When a leaf is aging, it will start to turn yellow. And this is basically so that the plant can make more room and save that nutrients for the new leaves that are going to be growing in. So now that we've made that distinction, I want to talk about what to do when a plant is actually dying, when it's actually not doing very well, because I think that's what a lot of people went to that video originally for, and I kind of want just to revisit that whole idea. The first thing that I would say to do when you notice that a plant is going downhill is to take a flashlight to it, take some light or microscope or something to the plant, like get on the plant's level, like really get your face in the plant and look at what's going on. More likely than not, it's some sort of pest. Mealybugs, thrips, spider mites, what am I missing? Scale. All of those pests can really go unnoticed for a long time, so it's important that you take a good look at your plant almost immediately when you notice that something is going wrong, because if you can catch that early on, it's a lot easier to combat the infection or the infestation. And I made an entire video probably a year or two ago all about pests, all of the most common houseplant pests, how to identify them and what to do to treat them. So I will link that down below, and I will have so much more information than what I'm able to share here. But definitely step one is to check for pests. And then step two would be to observe the plant and just see what has changed around the plant to possibly cause these issues. So I'm not taking any action immediately once I notice it. I'm just going to sort of watch the plant. I'm going to look at it and observe what it's doing and how rapidly it's dying, I guess, because that will really depend on how much action you need to take. Like, for example, if the plant is going downhill really fast, like from day one that you notice that it's not doing well to day two that you notice it's not doing well, if you've lost a lot of foliage, the color of the plant is significantly changing, that's when you know that you need to take drastic measures. And that most drastic measure would be either to just let it go, or to cut it down all the way down to like a stump, or take cuttings off of it and propagate those cuttings. And then also you can keep the stump if you want. Look around the room. Is there a draft? Because it is now winter time, so there might be a new draft that was introduced into the room that you might not have noticed last year, or maybe you didn't have a plant there last year. Maybe the plant is directly underneath a vent. That can oftentimes really hurt a plant. Is it next to a door? So anything like that is probably going to hurt your plant, and you will notice that, hopefully. Think about the last time that you watered the plant. Was it too soon? Was it too late? Sometimes watering plants in the change of the seasons can be really confusing, especially for me, because I tend to wait a long time to water my plants as it is. But in the winter time, I sort of start feeling like, oh, I maybe should water my plants. And then I get out my moisture meter just to double check, because I do rely on my moisture meter a lot in the changing of the seasons. And I'll get out my moisture meter just to check the plant, and it turns out that it doesn't need water. So maybe I forgot to use my moisture meter one time and I watered without checking, and now the roots might be going downhill, and as a result the foliage is going downhill as a warning sign to me. So just think about that plant, your habits around that plant, and the plant's environment before you do anything wild. More often than not, new plant parents or just people who don't have a ton of experience with houseplants will see a brown or yellowing leaf and immediately unpot the plant and repot it, or move it really far away from its current spot. So
Two things are wrong with doing that. Number one, you don't want to put the plant in even more stress by unpotting it if it isn't necessary, because sometimes it really is just an old leaf, and sometimes it's something as simple as it needs more nutrients. And if you completely unpot the plant, you disturb the microbial activity in the soil. You're kind of disrupting a lot of things. So I find it better to just not do that. And then also on the other side of that, if you're moving the plant around every time you see something going wrong, plants don't necessarily like to be moved a ton. Now, I do rearrange my plants every once in a while, but it's not something that I do on a weekly or even a daily basis. On a daily or even on a weekly basis, I guess would make more sense. But it's something that I do maybe once a quarter. And there's certain plants that are more sensitive to movement, such as the ficus, for example. Like, I brought my ficus in from outside and I had a lot of yellow leaves. So sometimes these things can be circumstantial, and you just have to be aware of what's been going on around the plant before you make any big moves. Once you've taken time to observe the plant, you definitely have noticed possibly a reason why the plant might be acting like this, and perhaps it's a root issue. So maybe at this point you feel comfortable to unpot the plant, check on the roots, and if everything looks good, you can pot the plant back up. I'm not saying that unpotting the plant to check the roots is the worst thing you could do. It's definitely not. I just think that you should avoid doing that often and find other ways to check on the health of your plant. Now, if you get down into the roots and you notice that they're black and mushy and gross, that is a root rot situation, which is super common if you are not familiar with letting a plant completely dry out between waterings, or maybe you waited too long to water and then those roots died off, and then the plant wasn't able to uptake water, and then those roots started rotting. So root rot can come from too much water or too little water. I usually experience root rot from like too little water because, like I said, I tend to let my plants go sometimes a little bit too long between waterings. So if you get down in there and the roots are not looking good, you can cut off all of the dead roots and you can try to reroot the plant either in soil or water or spag or cocoa peat, whatever preference you have. I would say choose the one that you feel the most comfortable with, but also just know that with a root rot situation, unfortunately, at least in my situation, I can really only share anecdotal experiences as most plant people can. In my experience, when a plant has root rot and I try to salvage at least some of the roots, it usually doesn't come back, and I've had better luck just starting the plant over, either from like a wet stick or just from really, really minimal roots. So I cut off like as much root as I can, only leaving a little bit left, because yeah, once the rotting process starts, it's really hard to stop it. And I've oftentimes had root rot reoccur multiple times because yeah, the plant was just going downhill and I couldn't really save it. So I have been successful in saving a root rotted plant by just starting it again from a wet stick, and that was my philodendron mammii. And in that situation, it did work out for me, but there haven't been a lot of situations where I've been able to bring a plant back from root rot. And I'm sure that there's other people who have, so definitely scour around the YouTube and Instagram world for more stories and experiences with root rot, because other people might have even better advice than I have. But I'd say cut off as much root as you can and try to reroot it in a medium that you are comfortable with. So if you unpot it and the roots look fine, but somehow the plant is still just not doing very well, I would say repot it and put it in a really, really high humidity environment. So I currently have an IKEA greenhouse cabinet, which I have used to rehab many different plants. That is where my philodendron mammii was for most of its life in its recovery process, and then I had a few other plants in there as well. Just if they weren't looking very good out here in my room or just in other parts of my house, I would put them in that cabinet where they're getting a lot of humidity, and usually things would turn around pretty easily, because in that high humid environment, they're getting exactly what they want and what they need, and that boost of humidity, that boost of light from being underneath the grow lights is really helpful for them. I kind of think of it sort of like an ICU. You know, they're getting like all the good stuff, like all the good drugs to help them heal really quickly. And then there comes a point where the plant is able to slowly move out of the cabinet and back out into its regular environment. And then I'm just more mindful to water it more often, or just be, I don't know, more mindful of the plant itself so that I can pay attention to it when it needs things from me, because you know, when you have a big collection, certain plants can be forgotten or just neglected even without you trying. It just happens sometimes because we're not going to be able to care for like literally everything at all times. And if that's what you want, then you need to have a smaller collection. I think there's a lot of people with big collections, and that's why we lose plants so often, because we have more than we can handle. And so that's why I keep mine at around 100, because I feel like that's the right number for me and how much I can handle when it comes to caring for my plants and giving them all the love that they need. Now, if you don't have a greenhouse cabinet or something like that, you can also buy like an Amazon version or just a hardware store version, not just Amazon. I happened to get mine off of Amazon a couple years ago. It was just a green and plastic greenhouse, and it worked so well for me for a very long time. It was definitely a really great way to hold off until I could get the IKEA Millsbo greenhouse. If you don't have the space for even that, I would definitely suggest getting a 2-gallon Ziploc bag and putting the plant in that. Now that will only work for smaller plants, but I currently have 3 plants in a 5-gallon Ziploc bag in my Millsbo cabinet, because my Millsbo has been having some ceiling issues. Like for some reason, the humidity is just not holding very well. All of a sudden, I think that I need to replace the weather stripping, but that's another conversation. Anyway, so I have some plants that were in there that were really needing some extra TLC, and even the Millsbo at like 60 to 70% humidity wasn't enough. When I tell you the fuzzy roots on those plants, like the new leaves that are coming in, they look so good. And when they grow more leaves, they'll have more places to draw energy from, so that just makes a healthier plant in general. I love a 1-leaf wonder, but I also love when a 1-leaf wonder turns into like a 2 or 3 or 4-leaf wonder, and putting them in that super high humid environment is really helpful to, you know, give them a boost to put out more leaves and to have more places to draw in that energy. Also to make a stronger root system. I have a plant in there that did not have a very good root system, and since it's been in there, it's grown like 4 more aerial roots, which is really good, because those are going to grow down into the soil and be able to uptake nutrients for that plant. And the last thing that you should do if you think that a plant is dying, if it really does not seem like you can save it, if you do see a part of the plant that is still green, you can take a cutting off of that and try to root it in your preferred medium. So whether that be water, sphagnum moss, cocoa peat, soil, what else do people do? Perlite, vermiculite, pon, leca, like there's so many ways to propagate now. So definitely try your hand at cutting off a piece and just saving that piece, because you know, with that small piece, although it's really sad to lose the whole plant, you will at least be saving part of the plant, so it's kind of still the same plant anyway, even if it is much smaller. But I really suggest that you do that if it is sort of like a last ditch effort thing, or even if you just don't have the capacity to go through all the steps that I said before, you could just take a cutting and be done with it. Like in certain situations, if a big plant has a pest, I've seen people just take a small cutting of it and throw away the rest of the plant, because it's just not worth it, and you don't want that plant to infect everything else. When it comes to pests, you kind of have to like choose your battles and decide what you're going to do, because battling pests, especially something like thrips, can take the life out of you. And I know this because I'm watching other people who have dealt with thrips. I'm hesitant to say, but I've never had that one before. I've had pretty much everything else, but I haven't had that one. Lord be with me the day that I do experience that, because it's sort of like a when, not an if. But I've been pretty lucky so far, and watch, tomorrow I'm gonna find one and not be very lucky. But anyway, point is, sometimes it's just not worth it to save the plant, and you have to take that up with yourself and like decide for yourself what you want to do, because in a situation like this, when the plant is like dying, it's a lot harder to try to sell it or give it to somebody, because it's kind of like giving somebody your dirty underwear and being like, do you want these? They're used and they're dirty, but you could have a new pair of underwear. And like some people would be up for that for sure, but it's a lot of work to find somebody who would be up for that. And then like I just tend to feel kind of guilty for putting that burden on somebody else. So I do my very best to save a plant before I ever even think about throwing it away or giving it away, because I love my plants obviously, but at the same time I have to sort of cut my losses if it's not worth it, because at the end of the day, it's a plant. Like if it was my Alba Monstera, which took me like years to find, hello, I would do everything I can to fix that plant. And like, go to the ends of the earth to make sure that this plant is okay. I will be taking cuttings, I will be doing wet stick propagation, I'll be doing it all. But you know, with something like a Fittonia, our girl in the thumbnail, she's actually just thirsty right now, but it was the perfect model. If my Fittonia dies, it's literally not the end of the world. I've had like 7 different Fittonias minimum, and sometimes they just die and it's not worth it for me to fix it because I can go buy a new one for $5. And that's just the end of it, you know? I definitely want to caution you against having a habit of killing and replacing plants, because at that point, you're probably working outside of your means, like how many plants that you can take care of if that's happening to you a lot. So, you know, if that is happening a lot of plants are dying around you, maybe reassess the size of your collection and think about what you can do to downsize or just not buy plants for a while, because yeah, maybe like rewire your brain with how you consume plants, because we really don't want to be just consuming and killing plants over and over again. But yeah, that's all my advice for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you learned something, and if you have anything to add, please don't hesitate to leave it down in the comments below. I love seeing my comment section being like a little forum of people helping each other out. I think that's the best. And that's totally like the point of why I make these videos, is to create community for all of us to learn about plants. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.